Hi, Super Brains. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever the case might be for you. I am Alex, and on behalf of the Mindvalley team, I would like to welcome you to the Super Brain Live Q&A call with Jim Kwik. We have a great session prepared for you today. We have very interesting topics that we will cover. All of them belong to the content of the entire Super Brain Quest, and I believe you'll get a lot of aha moments or quickenings from this session. That being said, and without further ado, let's welcome directly from Tallinn and directly from the stage, as I have been told, a man with a 10-foot Hulk in his backyard, our wonderful and inspiring superhero brain coach on this journey, Jim Kwik. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Alex. Hello to all our super brains. Super brains unite. Where do you want to start?
Okay. Let's start off with our first question for tonight. It comes from Max. And Max says, so far we've learned vocabulary, but how to learn complete phrases or multiple pages of text? For example, like theater scripts or film scripts.
I think sometimes people want to be able to remember things word for word. It could be scripts, like you mentioned. It could be poetry. It could be a sales script. And so the first thing I would say is, and there are a number of R's, and I'll just kind of jot some down in my notebook here as I'm going through it with you, because I think writing is one of those R's. But first thing I would do, obviously, is read it. And I always recommend when you're reading it to use a visual pacer. Not only will it help you to get more, improve your focus because you use a visual pacer, when you're reading this script or this poem or whatever it is that you want to remember, it helps you to get better in touch with your reading, because there's a synesthesia, there's this overlap of senses when certain senses work very close together, like your sense of smell and your sense of taste, as you know, that often when you're tasting something, you're not tasting, you're smelling it. So just as your sense of smell and taste are closely linked, so is your sense of sight and your sense of touch. So do that. I would say also after that, reflecting on what it is very important. I work with a lot of actors, method actors and such, and after you read what you're doing, I like reflecting on it, meaning actually meditating on the information and let it sink into your unconscious, asking yourself questions like, what does this mean? What is this character going through? I feel like whether it's poetry or if it's actual scripts, it'll have more, a deeper meaning for you. After you do that, I like the idea of writing things down. I'm partial towards writing with a pen and paper rather than typing. And so I would actually write your reflections down on paper. I would actually write down the things that you want to learn verbatim. It'll definitely encode it in a different way, kinesthetically, in terms of your muscle memory, which is very powerful. Repetition does play a role, so that's another R. I would say that's the fourth R. So, we're talking about reading, we're talking about reflection, we're talking about writing with an R, and repetition does make a difference. Even though I'm not, I just got to work with like 40 children just now here at Tallinn, and it was anywhere from 6 years old to 12 years old, and it was wonderful. We got them doing a lot of the super brain exercises, and I think some of these videos are online because all the parents were filming it. But we were able to get past repetition through using intensity and some of the other things that we teach, imagination, visualization, but repetition still is powerful. So repetition, review. There's also apps that also help you to do this. A lot of actors will download. So I would say the next R could be resources. Jim loves the iterations, right? Everything has to be an acronym or just some kind of this balloon, battery, barrel board, and so on, or the 4Gs or the mindset and such, but resources. And so there are some apps that actors use. One is called Rehearsal, that you could actually put your dialogue in there, and then you could play it at night throughout the day. You could actually do spaced repetition with it. So review would be another R also as well. I could probably go through and do 6 more. One of them actually, I'll add another R in there, is run, meaning run your lines with people. It actually helps to talk about what you need to talk about with if you're acting or you're going to have an audience or a dialogue with somebody. So.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm seeing confusion a little bit here. So visual pacer, Jim recommended a visual pacer, aka a pen or your finger, the most ancient of visual pacers.
Yeah.
I see another question here, like how long will I have access to the course? You'll have long access to the course as long as you have a Mindvalley account, so don't worry about that. If you're a little bit behind with the sessions, don't worry, do it at your own space. Question number 2 from Kaing. Remembering the content of a meeting. How do I go about remembering the exact content of a meeting without having to take notes? Is there a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have clients do this, our students doing this regularly, and there are a number of techniques that you could do this. So if you want to sit in on a meeting and you don't want to have a pad and a pen to be able to take notes, we often have people going on sales calls or doing coaching meetings, and they're not going to write anything down. But they're writing it down on the inside, if you will, like a lot of our students who do that for taking tests and quizzes and such. But when they're done, they will actually take notes afterwards. So I'll teach you one mnemonic device to be able to do it. But after you do that, after the meeting is done, I do recommend you actually write them down and keep a filing folder, and then you could review it. Let's say you're doing a follow-up meeting 40 days later, 30 days later, 2 weeks later, then you could review that file, your mental hooks, depending on what strategy you used. And then you can go in without notes again and your follow-up sales call or meeting. And it's like they think you're thinking about them the whole entire time because you can remember everything. And so 2 of the ways that I take notes when I'm in a meeting is, my favorite still is the location technique. It still is. It's so time tested and it's true. Taking someplace like your home or the mall or your office or your body, or some people actually go in with their suitcase and they actually go and say the zipper is the first place and the side pocket is the second place. The latch is the third place. The combination is the fourth place, and so on. They'll actually stick that information right on there. So whether you're getting information in the meeting or you're going in the meeting with information, meaning you might have a sales process, like maybe 8 points to a sales call. Like maybe the first thing you want to do is elicit need. The second thing is bonding and rapport, giving a presentation, handling objections. You could turn those into pictures and put it in your locations. So the PEG method, absolutely, Mary, will work. So another technique, instead of basically what I'm looking for was if I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm just looking, there are 3 parts to memory. You encode it, right? You store it, and then you recall it or retrieve it. The encoding is really how you're doing it. So it's really the visualization, adding the emotion that makes it more memorable, right? More sticky. The storage is the actual place I'm storing it. So, once the glue is there and what I want to remember, I store it either on my body or in my office or on my briefcase or in a home or some location. And you can use the PEG method. You could use the sun list. You can make lists up. A lot of people make an antenna list, or a number rhyme list. 1 is bun and 2 is shoe and 3 is tree and 4 is door and so on. There's infinite amount of places. And here's the best part about it. Once you encode it and you store it and then you can retrieve it, after a while it goes from your short to long-term memory. Like there's so many things that I can, remember that I don't have to use the pictures anymore because your true knowledge knows it. Just like when you use techniques to memorize someone's name. Once you know the person's name is Alex, or Ben or Mary, or Dan or Marco or whoever it is, then you don't have the technique disappears. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Number, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Like once you know the knowledge, you don't have to use the technique. But what it does is it helps to really fast track it from short to long-term memory. And certainly in your, I always talk about the 6-second syndrome. You need something to capture that when you're in that meeting and you're not taking notes, a way of capturing that information. And then when you're done with the meeting, review it inside, make external notes.
So seeing here, I'll get through a few of these questions. How can you remember dreams? You are in day 23 when this video is happening. So there is a entire session on that particular subject. Another couple of questions that I see here, like remembering names, if they are coming in a fast succession, which method to use and when, how can one improve the speed of memorizing things? All of these we already covered in a previous live Q&A call, which will be available to you in day 30. So on day 30, you have another one of these sessions, beautifully color-coded there with the topics that are being addressed. So we will not be addressing some of those because they are already answered there. Okay, let's move on the list here from Lani. How do you learn something visually, like being able to read the characters of a foreign language that doesn't use the Roman alphabet. For example, Mandarin, Korean, Japanese, Arabic.
Yeah.
Or simply learning to sight read musical notes, for example.
Yeah. So visual memory is something that's absolutely trainable. And so I'm excited about this. And there's a number of ways. And whether it's Chinese characters or it happens to be musical notes, one of the ways of enhancing your visual recall is to look at something in front of you. Literally take something, an object. It could be as simple as this glass of water. It could be as simple as this pen or anything else. You put it in front of you. And how do you train your visual? Because basically all your senses that are, whether you see it out here or you hear it out here or you feel it, you could also do it internally, right? There's external things that you see, and then there's internal things that you can imagine, right? And so what we're doing is we could actually train that sense by looking at the object in front of you, closing your eyes and be able to picture it. And now this it doesn't matter, and we do this with spelling words often. We'll take a word like Albuquerque, or a word that people often have challenges spelling, because spelling is a visual strategy, and we talk about it briefly in the program. A lot of people mess up spelling because they try to use an auditory strategy and pronounce it phonetically, but most words aren't spelled phonetically, especially in the English language. But if somebody is a poor speller, they have a poor visual memory. And the one ways we train like spelling bee champions is we'll have them write down the word. So you could write down the character, if you will, or the musical notes, and you take it, and you actually, to encode it, not only do you look at it and close your eyes and look at it and close your eyes, but you can actually take it, experiment with this, take it and move it up and to the left. Literally write the word here, or the character here, or the note here, and take it and move it up and to the left and look at it. Don't move your head, just your eye movement up and to the left. And what happens is you send more blood flow to that part of your brain that helps with your visual recall. And it's a great way of encoding that information. And so we do that with spelling. We'll take an index card, have someone hand write the word they want to spell correctly, move it up and to the left, and then they'll be able to recall it much better.
Let's jump to the next question from Emin. Except for omega-3s and vitamin B, is there any other brain nutrient that is good for our brain?
Brain nutrients is something we mention a lot, especially when we're talking about the 10 keys for unlocking your super brain. For me particularly, I think everyone has to make the decisions on their own and do their own research. I just wanted to state, just because I'm not a health practitioner, I'm not a nutritionist, nothing that ends on ist, online or otherwise. What I recommend people do, I personally don't take nootropics. I like to get most of what I want from Whole Foods, but that's my personal preference. When I'm in doubt, I really do believe people are bio-individual, and that if you're not sure, you should get tested. You should talk to, first of all, a health practitioner that is an expert at that. Now, supplements I do take. I happen to always do take DHA and a good multi, but I never take anything on like all the time, because I always cycle off nutrients also as well. Sometimes I do add stuff into my, because I travel so much. Like I've been in 8 cities in the past 2.5 weeks, and it's not stopping anytime soon. And so I do carry some supplements just because I'm eating, not as well as I would if I'm making stuff at home. But I would say go to a functional medicine doctor, get a blood test, and they could tell you food sensitivity is very important. It breaks it down from red, yellow, and green. And so red you stay away from, yellow you eat sparingly, and green you can enjoy. Also nutrient density tests also as well to see what you're lacking. But it's not really my specialty, and I try to be very, very responsible giving advice at things that that you should maybe talk to some professional about.
Let's see here from, next question comes from Daniel. Is there a way to keep my focus stronger?
Yeah. Okay, so focus, just at a meta level, just remember that focus is a muscle. So we'll start from there. And most people, the best way of keeping it stronger is not to weaken it. And I feel like a lot of people actually are exercising their distraction muscles by indulging in things that that you shouldn't do, like always picking up your phone. And this, you've heard me say, don't pick up your phone the first hour of the day because you're highly suggestible. And so here's the thing. I look at focus like a meditation. And so meditation is a great exercise for focus. Now, most people, when you say meditate, is like, oh, I kind of do that and everything, but that's all about just being in Zen and peace. And for me, it's not, at least not completely. When I meditate, my goal is not just to have my goal is not to have an empty mind. And for me, it's actually an exercise in focus and mindfulness. And when my focus goes somewhere, and it does, it'll just like for anybody, it'll go somewhere in this monkey mind, if you will, but the exercise is bringing it back. And that's where you build your focus muscles. And often I bring it back with techniques you've learned through Superbrain, like Abra. Breathing is a big part of for me getting focus. One of the other things that I do to get focus is I ask myself questions. So for number one, focus, I build my focus daily because I don't indulge in things that distract me, because every time you pick up on social media, likes, shares, comments, my problem is it's created to make you addicted to these tools and technology, which obviously I do have a smartphone and I use it to make my life more convenient. The challenge is when we're so dependent on it, that's a problem because it creates weak muscles. But the other problem is a lot of people are picking up their phones when they're bored, or they're picking up their phones when they don't need to out of any kind of utility or function. They're picking out of it because out of routine, because we've been programmed to do so. So what I would say is, number one, manage your environment always, meaning don't have your phone there. Even having, it's been shown, like if you even have your phone at the dinner table, it actually creates anxiety for the people around you, just having it there, even if it's on silent, because it puts people into that, more stressed state. Besides manage your environment, also as well, the reason why you don't want to rely on your phone and pick it up when you're not using it is because a phone, like any kind of technology, fire, any money, whatever, it's meant to be a tool, right? But if you're just, if you're going to there out of boredom or just out of, because conditioning, then it's using you, right? So it's supposed to be a tool that you use, but when it's using you, then honestly, who becomes the tool, in that equation? And so I would really be mindful of that. The last thing I would say, besides mindfulness practice, like meditation and controlling your environment when it comes to your focus, is just be present. Meaning, if you want to regain your focus, I focus on 3 things that I see or 3 things that I hear at any given time. Like right now, I could look at in my environment and point out and mention out loud 3 things I see or 3 things I hear or 3 things I feel, and it'll get me in the present. Another way you can control your focus is asking questions. Probably one of the best ways, right? Because asking you shall receive. You start directing your reticular activating system and saying, what should I be focusing on right now? What's the most valuable use of this moment? What is my lead domino? Meaning, these are productivity questions you come up with when you think about lead domino. It's like you think about, so we all play dominoes when we're kids, right? But think about, there's certain dominoes that are coming up early that when you hit it, it knocks down all the other dominoes. And one of the ways to help you to focus in terms of productivity focus or learning focus is ask better questions. Like, what's going to give me the best return of my time right now? Any of those questions will shift your attention somewhere more useful.
A question that's related to what happened recently at Tallinn University. What is the best way to teach your great strategies to children to help them achieve in school?
Great question. Yeah, I'm doing another program tomorrow. So today was for children 6 to 12 years of age. Tomorrow, I believe it's 13 to like high school students. And so many different things. So I'll tell you what we did today. We took the children, it's like 40-ish children. And, first of all, they excel at Superbrain. They really did. There are a number of children there in that age range that actually went through that quest. So I'd highly recommend you experiment with your children, see if they would engage with the quest. Also, you'll find that many of the techniques there, like with these children specifically, I took them through the sun list. They memorized the sun list. I took them through the fire hydrant, battery, the fire hydrant, balloon, battery, barrel, that whole story. We equated that to the periodic table, and they all engaged. And they were just very present for that. I taught them how to count to 10 in Japanese. I taught them Superbrain yoga, those exercises that we did. We did an exercise, also as well, memorizing the periodic table, which is, and that's way periodic table. I didn't hit chemistry until like second or third year in high school. And these children aren't even in high school and they memorize the first 10 elements. So all of this, whether they go through the quest with you or it's something you teach them, some of them had gone through the quest and some of them it was their parents that walked them through, but they knew the sun list, they knew the body list, they knew the 10 superfoods. It's pretty remarkable.
Okay, we talked about visual memory at the beginning of the session. Now the next question comes from Mihaela. Is there a technique in learning a good pronunciation or improving your pronunciation when learning a foreign language, for example?
Auditory recall is something that it can be built. I'm not really sure if people could learn, perfect pitch like that, just like people learning how to have a photographic memory. I don't think necessarily photographic memory is trainable, but that could also be a limitation. I always have to be careful of my own automatic negative thoughts also as well. But in terms of what I've seen and experienced, but certainly it is. And so all of your senses could be developed with the use of practice and the use of imagination and rehearsal. And so I would, part of it is the listening. So it's kind of interesting also with your senses. When I was speaking in Sardinia at AFest a couple of months ago, it was on longevity. And I was talking about brain longevity specifically. And I talk about this study that everyone should know because it'll answer a number of questions. I'm always looking for the lead domino that's going to help answer a lot of other questions, right? What comes first? Just like on your productivity list or things to do list or something there, if you did, it would probably knock off 3 or 4 other things also. But going back to this, there's a study done by Ellen Langer at Harvard. And in 1979, she went into a nursing home and just was really not disgusted, but just disenchanted, like think about the environment, that this is where people spend their remaining years. And she did an experiment where she took 8 men and put them into a monastery. But what was different was this monastery was decorated like it was 1959 exactly. So 1979 to 1959, the black and white television was playing shows. The magazine, let's say it's Time magazine, had the correct cover story on there, also for that, and everything. Took off the mirrors out of the place, and they were told, hey, when you're walking through those doors, it's 1959. And a lot of the men walked in with canes, and they beforehand they did, to answer your question, they did tests. They tested their cognitive abilities, their focus, their memory, their strength, and their muscular strength, and their senses, meaning their sense of sight and their sense of hearing. And they did a control group where they had 8 guys go into a similar room, but it wasn't decorated. It was modern, but they were told to just reminisce that it was 20 years ago, just reminisce. Came back just 1 week later, just 1 week later. And what do you think happened? I mean, these men, it was like Cocoon. If you saw the movie, they did tests, and these men, not only did they have were they stronger, physically stronger. Even many of them who had canes did not use canes leaving after 7 days of just living in that environment. But also on top of that, they had a sharper memory. They had a better focus. And they had sharper senses, including their sense of sight and their sense of hearing. And so part of it also in having our be able to pronounce words and accents and such, and the nuances there is improving our senses and imagination rehearsal. What was also interesting, just as a side tangent, they had a focus group. They took pictures before and after of these men before they walked into the monastery a week before, and obviously when they left. And they did a focus group. They filled a room full of people, and they said, and they put the pictures side by side and said, which one's younger? And 100% of them chose the latter. Meaning, the one that was the most recent, said that was the younger photo after just 1 week. So you could search this. It's actually called the Clockwise Study by Ellen Langer. And my point in bringing this up is, I don't know any quick fixes, if you will, in terms of the auditory, the recall and for the pronunciation. Part of it has to do with your focus as honing your senses and the practice of it. I know it can be improved. Absolutely. And the rehearsal is very important also as well. Ellen Langer is the name, the counterclockwise study. But I bring that up also, the power of imagination, the power of your imagination, because there was nothing different in the environment other than, you know, the media that was going on and such. They took the mirrors out so people didn't see themselves in terms of how old they were, so they could actually live back then. But I remember I did an event, and in the audience was Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote, as many know, one of my favorite books, The Four Agreements. And I brought him on stage, and I asked him, "What's your superpower?" And he looked at me and says, "Jim, my superpower is like all of your superpowers, you know, everyone here. It's this superpower of imagination." And so that's why I like these exercises that we do, because you can't have a new thought. Like, everyone's brain is going to be different because of this conversation. You cannot have a thought without it changing your biochemistry and your neurology. So your brain rewires will be different, because a person's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. Literally hundreds of millions of your brain cells are firing off right now to be able to understand this, and you're making new connections. So your thoughts are real things. So be very conscious. That's why I'm always mindful of my self-talk. It's not just when people say, "Oh, killing ants," I know that, but if you really are doing it and you want to take 7 days and have like a fast off of complaining and a fast off of negative thoughts, it would change your world, because your thoughts are things. People would be so concerned and more conscious if they realized how much power you have in your mind has. And so my rule is, never say anything that you don't want to be true, you know, just to be safe. Don't say anything that you don't want to be true.
When trying to remember names, do you use the same imagery for all persons that you meet that have the same name, or can that lead to confusion? For example, do you imagine a lamb every time you meet a Mary?
Yeah, so Sandra, that's a great question. So for you, I use like a sandy beach, and that's what I use for myself. And so anytime I meet someone named Sandra, or I always use sand. 100%. There's no exception. I rarely say there's no exception, but I always use the same thing. So 1 always equals 1. And so if I use a tennis racket for John, like for John McEnroe, that's where I grew up playing tennis in that era. So I always use John, a tennis racket for John. And every time I meet a John, I'll always use a tennis racket, but I'll never use a tennis racket for like Roger. Right, you know, like for Roger Federer, right? I would always use 1-to-1, and so each time I use something, I would always use the same thing over and over again.
Next question I see was upvoted also by several people, from Marco. What is your process on how to tackle technical content, like programming language or technical language in general, or a 2,000-page dense technical book on memorizing all the key concepts?
So the answer is certainly we're taking, just like how you eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And so the goal when I have very technical information, you know, whether it happens to be something in the area of business, or it's in science, or it's in computers, technology, the goal is to be able to organize the information, right? Because you want to be able to, everything is manageable when it's more bite size. And so for me, I like to mind map information, and that's a big way I organize information. If I'm tackling a textbook, for example, I never just go read a technical textbook. There's a lot of data there, right? But I do 3 things. Number 1, I make a map of it. So let's say you're learning technical information. I look to build a map for me. Metaphorically, a map before we had GPS and Google Maps and everything else like that. You know, if you needed to take a trip across the country, you would go into a gas station, you would buy a map, because it allows you to see the big picture. It allows you to see the way, you know, the different sites along the roads and such. It allows you to save time. And so a map for me is, let's say I'm reading a technical book, is I'll go through it and I'll look at, for example, I'll go through and look at the pictures. And so if I'm tackling, let's say, a technical chapter in a textbook, I'll go through and look at all the pictures first. And a picture for me is anything that's not text. So it could be an illustration, it could be a graph, it could be a chart, it could be a diagram, it could be a photograph, anything that's non-text. non-copy words, if you will. Another thing I'll look for when I'm going through it is I'll go through writing down the vocabulary, meaning that I find that a lot of technical information, if you understood the meaning of certain words, that they become the building blocks of the brick wall, if you will, of comprehension and understanding. So I'll actually organize the information where I'll look at all the photos or the pictures, if you will. And now I'm not going to know what all those things are, but what it does is it allows me to prompt a question, right? But it'll give me an overview. It's kind of like looking at a map at some of the sites that are coming up. You might not know what all those things are, but it opens, it's a first touch, and it allows you to see a big picture, and also, more importantly, ask questions, right? The second thing is I'll write down all the words, the technical words that I am not familiar with. A third thing that'll help me to absorb technical information faster is by asking questions. So that'll be part of my map. I will explicitly write down questions that I have about that technical information or that body of knowledge or that chapter, if you will, depending on how you're chunking it. Another thing I'll do is I'll organize it. And this is the actual mind map itself. This is where I'll actually take the information and I'll put the main idea in the middle, and spiraling out from the middle, kind of like branches of a tree, I'll put the sub ideas. And then the reason why I like whole brain note taking over linear note taking is because it really satisfies my creative side. Meaning I don't have to, I can see, because sometimes you could take 30 pages of notes after reading technical information, but something on page 17 could be more important than what's on page 1. But if I put the main idea in the center and spiraling from that, like radiating outside of the center are the sub ideas, and then out from those sub ideas, you could duplicate that like a fractal. You could do that also as well. And I could go on, but that's what I'm building. I'm looking to build a map on it. And then after I map it out, then I go through a process where I actually go through and I skim the information. And when I'm skimming through the information, the data, and I'm not studying it yet, I'm actually skimming it. So I'm doing a second go through, and then after I'm done skimming, I'll see if I could define some of those photos or the diagrams or whatever it is. And when I'm skimming with purpose, right? I'm looking to see if I could go and define some of those vocabulary words or answer some of those questions, or even fill in more of my map and such. And notice this is even whole brain note taking, like mind mapping. So I'm a big fan of Tony Buzan, out of the UK. So you could Google him. And we touch on note taking also in the program, different ways of taking notes.
I'll pass in the link to Tony Buzan and mind mapping.
And then Alex, just really quickly, after I break all those down, eventually when I micro chunk this, then I use the mnemonic devices to be able to memorize it, right? Once it's organized and I chunk it down into manageable bite-sized parts, then I use whatever the technique you choose, because we've learned so many by the point you're at right now in Superbrain, whether it's basic association or it's chain linking or it's the loci method, there's so many different ways that you could apply. And then there are also accelerated learning techniques, even when you're studying something like managing your environment and using lemon to anchor, certain smells. Helped you to be able to anchor the information and then triggering it when you need to perform or you're taking the test with the same triggers, olfactory triggers.
Okay, let's see. Next question from Maria. I love your morning routine, but do you have any tips of fitting it all in? It takes more than an hour for me.
Yeah. So the answer is no. If you have children, you have a job, you have all these other things, it's not always easy. My suggestions in Superbrain are, like, even when I talk about remembering names, you don't have to do everything. The goal is but you always get more benefit doing something rather than nothing. And most people don't know what to do, so they don't do anything, and they default into a routine that they never planned by design. So just like with remembering names, you learn so many different ways: the FDR method, the PI method, B, Dr. Swab, MOM. There's so many different things, and so you don't have to use every single thing to remember names. And you should definitely listen to Alex's advice about watching the other question and answer, where we talked about how to remember names faster, in groups and stuff like that. So you don't have to use all of it, because maybe there's not time to use all of it, but it's always better to use something. So like, saying the name, you might not, let's say you might not visualize the name, but at least you say the name, you use the name, and you ended with the name. right? Or maybe you didn't necessarily go through and ask a person about their name, but you took a minute to visualize the person's name. Something is better than nothing. So when it comes to your morning routine, it really becomes like time management, but really priority management. You know, some people I know got a lot of benefit by waking up a little bit early to make time to do these things. It's really the opportunity cost, because the one thing we all have that's the same, it's not, we don't have this same resources. You know, people have different amount of money, they have different amounts of contacts and networks and education and blah, blah, blah. But we all have the same amount of time. We all have 86,000 seconds, 86,400 seconds. And it's not even about time management, it's about priority management. And, you know, I also have a podcast, you know, which is more tips. You know, Super Brain is training. You know, it's like a 30-day system for doing that, and so it's a training where we practice and such. And that's why when people finish it, they're able to do these things. But we have a podcast where we just talk about just a tip, you know, a tip of the day, if you will. So it's not a training, more as a brain hack. But the most recent one, I talk about focal points, and this is to answer your question for morning routines. Right now, this is we're in the most incredible, have you been here, Alex? In Estonia here, we're at like a power plant, for the lack of a better word. I mean, it's like a deserted power plant, and it's amazing. And you go through it, and there are all these pillars and beams, and it reminds me of the story of my latest podcast episode. And this is for your time management and your productivity and your morning routine. And I think everyone can benefit from this. This is your big takeaway maybe out of this conversation, because it's fresh, is I opened it up. It's all about working smart versus working hard. Everyone always says work smart, you know, not hard, but how do you actually do that? What does that actually mean, right? As opposed to a nice bumper sticker or a nice, you know, meme that you put on Instagram. For me, it's about finding a focal point. And the example I would give you is in this imagine you're in a power plant, and all of a sudden one day the power plant just shuts off, and like just pure silence. And the workers are like, what's going on? You know, the operations manager is freaking out because every minute, every hour that goes by, they're losing tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever. And it's becoming very dangerous. And nobody's able to fix it, none of the workers. So they call a local technician, and the technician shows up like an engineer. And he goes around the property in a few minutes, looks at just one of the beams. And on that beam is a box, electrical box. And he puts an X on that electrical box. And he opens up the electrical box, and what's in there? Bolts, wires, screws. And he goes to one very specific screw, and he turns it maybe a quarter of an inch. And then bam, the entire power plant turns on. And it's funny, to complete the story, the operations manager like, thank you, you saved the day. Thank you so much. And he's like, what do I owe you? And he's like, $10,000. And he's like, $10,000, you know, you did us a big good today, but you're only here for like 5 minutes. Anyone could have turned that screw. He's like, give me an itemized bill, please. And he's like, I'm not going to email it to you. He pulled out of his pocket, literally a notebook, and he tears out a sheet like this, and he just writes down this. He's like, and he writes down a receipt, gives it to him, an invoice, and the operations manager looks at the piece of paper, and he's like, yep. And he goes and then gives him a check for $10,000. And then when you look at the sheet of paper, it says this: turning screw, $1. Knowing what screw to turn, $9,999. And my point in bringing this up, everyone, all you super brains, is it's not, what's the point? Is it you have a screw loose? No, that's not the point. First of all, knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit. One of the reasons you want to have a super brain is we live in a knowledge economy, and you are paid for your expertise. And the faster you can learn, the faster you can earn, right? That's wisdom, applied wisdom, and it leads to wealth. But the other reason why I bring this up is there is usually in systems one electrical box. You know, where that X is, where you put that X out of the whole power plant here makes a difference. And where is that X in your relationship? Where is that X in your business? Where is that X to your learning? Where is that X in your career? Where is that where you can open it up, turn one screw, and all of a sudden everything turns on? Everything that you've ever worked for. And what I think is it's a focal point, right? It's like a forced multiplier. It's it's what's another word? It's that lead domino we were talking about before. It's like the one thing, if you hit the first domino, all the other dominoes like open wide. And here in the case of a power plant, and I'm just thinking because we are in a power plant, all the power turned on. And so like, what power do you want to turn on? And this is what working smart is for me. Everyone else is trying to turn all the other screws and open up all the boxes, is taking the time to discern, saying, what's the most important thing right now? What's the highest leverage opportunity right now? And that's why I love everyone who's in Superbrain, because that's a high leverage focal point. Because if you unlock your mental superpowers, you have a superbrain, it makes everything easier, right? So that's one of the X's. And so I would say that a lot of people are spending time not in the right place. And like, just like these workers, when everything went offline, they were going in all the wrong places. But as an expert, look at your business, look at your relationship, apply the 80-20 rule, right? Pareto's principle. What's the 20% that's going to give you 80% of the rewards? What's the 20% of the foods? What are 20% of the exercises? What are 20% of the words in your relationship or the daily activities? Coming back to your morning routine, I think it's very important for you to find out, don't use my 12 things, test them out, and then really find what moves the needle most for you. Some people really, that go those cold showers. Some people really, you read the comments, right? It's not just me. When you read the comments, it's like, man, brushing my hand and eating with the opposite, and brushing my hand with the teeth with the opposite hand and eating with the opposite hand really makes a difference for them. You know, other people love the brain tea. Other people love, they have the reading every single day. So find your focal point and see where you light up. That for me is working smart. And if you want to hear that whole episode, just go to the latest episode, Quick Brain, on your phone's app.
What time intervals are the most effective for revising a topic, for storing it to long-term memory? As in, is it best to revise a topic every 20 minutes or 6 hours and the next day and then in a couple of weeks? What is the best protocol?
You know, for simplicity, what we've worked with students and for 25 years, spaced repetition is a great way of taking short-term information and make it long-term. They call it interval review or spaced repetition. For simplicity, we found, and you can actually do this, you can actually search these terms. A lot of people find a high level of effectiveness reviewing something an hour later, a day later, a week later, and a month later. And even when I do, many of you are also, Jason and Vision have talked about in the Superbrain Facebook page, a reading program that we made that was available for people. We teach you how to, so what I was telling you about coding and taking difficult information and in doing that, there's a difference between studying, like cramming to forget, and studying to remember. And many people in college, they crammed all night and then they forgot it, a few days afterwards, as opposed to studying to remember. After you see something 1, 2, 3, there's always a dip. You see something once, it dips. See something twice, dip, but it doesn't dip quite as far as the first time. Third time, dip, but not quite as far. But usually when you see something about 4 times, then all of a sudden it gels and it becomes, now you don't actually lose as much as you actually gain. It actually starts to go up. The reading program, actually, I think Jason posted this in the Facebook page. It's jimkwik.com/MV for Mindvalley. If you want to join, there's no overlap, but it's the reading program that we offer to Mindvalley students. Very specifically, and so it's the kind of the complementary to Superbrain. Focus completely on reading though and study technical stuff. Now going back to what we're talking about here, in there, part of it is spaced repetition, is seeing something once, 2, 3, 4 times, and then you get that aha level. Oprah calls it the aha. And some people call it the eureka, I call it a quickening, where things gel and it integrates and then it goes to you. And so if you like to, I recommend 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, and then 1 month. But the main idea though, whether the time interval is important, is that you have space in between, space for you to be able to rest. Just like interval training when you're working out your body. You don't build the muscle when you work out, you build the muscle when you're actually resting, right? So that space in between is important.
We talked about the morning routine, it's in the quest, but what about an effective end of the day routine? What would you recommend?
So the first hour of the day is all about jump-starting my brain. The last hour of the day is about actually decompressing. And my main thing is actually slowing down. My main thing is actually sleep. And so there are a lot of things that I do, and I know a lot of people have suggestions on this. I'll give you mine and what works for me. So the first hour a day, again, is about stimulating and getting my brain online. The last hour a day is about actually taking it offline. And I don't want to be spending any time doing analytical thinking. I don't want to be in my executive, my brain. I want to be in the parasympathetic rest and rejuvenate state. My main focus the last hour of the day is sleep. So the goal is, for when it comes to sleep, how to maximize my sleep. I'll give you a number of suggestions. First, you could remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1, set schedule. All right. So I always want to be able to ideally go to sleep at the same time. So 1 is 1 schedule, meaning you go to sleep at the same time and you wake up at the same time, ideally. All right. Because that's good for your sleep consistency. When it changes, and everyone knows this through experience, when you travel, like, you have jet lag, everything gets changes. Number 2 is no caffeine past 2 p.m. We know that if caffeine's in your system past a certain time, it's going to be more difficult to sleep. Number 3, no food 3 hours before sleep, meaning that some people don't like to eat. Now, some people, again, with any kind of rules, there are exceptions. There's some foods that could actually help to put you to sleep a little bit, but generally your main meal is not going to happen 3 hours before you go to bed. And then 4, right? We're going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is set schedule. 2 is no caffeine past 2 p.m. 3 is no food past 3 hours before bed. Number 4, don't exercise 4 hours before sleep. So 4 hours before sleep, make sure you're not exerting yourself. And number 5, high five, meaning give the sun a high five every single morning. Wake up with the sun, because the sun is actually good for you to get sunlight, especially on your skin. Now, other things I'm doing at night as I'm preparing for it, in my bedroom, I do not have a television. I just don't believe it. I think anchoring, when you were talking about learning, I always like to study in the same place in my home. I always like to relax in the same place, and like, let's say it's entertainment, watching television. I always like to study and write. I always write in a very specific place. I have to eat in the same place, because those get anchored as your memory, as you know from going through Superbrain, your environment. And so for the bedroom for me is about sleep. Okay, so that's where you're anchoring. You're not doing work. You're not bringing your laptop in there. You're not studying in there. You're not eating in there. You want to anchor sleep. Blackout curtains are a must. Especially here, there's like 22 hours of daylight right now. I think the sun goes down at like 1 a.m. and gets up at like 3 a.m. here in Estonia. Dark blackout curtains, because even a little bit of light could affect your sleep. Even a light from your electrical clock. And when I'm in a hotel room, I'll always unplug it. Not keeping your phone on you. It's like I talk a lot about on these videos and the podcast about electromagnetic fields, EMFs. Like, you don't know what's coming off of your phone, and it disturbs me. I read recently 90% of kids have their phone underneath their pillows, and that cannot be good for your brain. It's just the brain did not evolve. Grow in an environment full of that. And so zero light. And then I'm also, while I'm doing this, before I do journal before I go to bed. I have a gratitude journal, and I also write, besides the 3 things that I'm grateful for, the 3 things that I want for tomorrow, so I can get them out of my head, because I don't want my analytical mind to think about, well, what do I have tomorrow, and this appointment and this thing. I would get them out of my head and purge them and write them down also as well. I keep the temperature very low, because it's been proven, low on the cold side is definitely better for people. They go into hibernation mode, if you will, like a bear, when it's cold, to be able to sleep. Sometimes in my morning routine, again, I have structure, but I also have flexibility. I take an Epsom salt bath, or like a bath with salts, because the magnesium is incredibly good to help you to sleep. No screens. I don't touch a screen 3 hours before bed. That's my personal preference. And if I need to, your phone and your computer have settings or apps that could take the blue light out, because the blue light is what's inhibiting the melatonin production. Even a little bit, it keeps you awake, and that's very important to be able to help you sleep. So I'm thinking about temperature. I'm thinking about sound, and some people use like nature sounds, or some people use some kind of meditation app on airplane mode. Obviously, some people use binaural beats to help them to be able to sleep also as well. Everything to be able to optimize your sleep. That's what I'm looking for, because sleep is so important for your brain. I mean, it's got to be one of the best life hacks out there.
Wonderful. I see also here a mention of a book, Sean Stevenson's Smart Sleep. I think Sean Stevenson also has another one. If it's this book, is like 21 tips and tricks in order to improve your sleep.
Sean's a dear friend. He spoke at my last event. I did 2 podcast episodes with him, but he wrote a book called Sleep Smarter. It's really a must read. Another great resource for everybody is a book called The Power of When. The Power of When, Dr. Michael Breus. We have words for it. It's like you're a night owl or an early bird, right? But he has actual 4 different animals. And once you know your animal chronotype, you know when to sleep. You know when to exercise. You know when to eat. You know when to ask for a raise. You know when to make love. You know everything, because it's not just what you do, or how you do it. It's when you do it. So the book is called The Power of When. And he also has written a number of books on sleep also as well. Dr. Michael Breus.
Actually, we are at time at this point. We managed to get through a lot of questions, so I hope you had a lot of insights and a lot of aha moments.
My main message to everybody here is to thank you for showing up. No matter where you are in the world right now, watching this live or in this recording, I feel like we're kindred spirits. I feel like we're kindred minds. I was the boy with the broken brain. And my 2 biggest struggles growing up as a kid was learning, and I had a fear of talking to people, like a paralyzing fear of talking to people. And the universe has a sense of humor, because all I do is talk to people about learning, right? And if that could be anything you take away from it, is that when during difficult times, I think that's where it really shapes us. If you're going through a challenging time right now, it's not your fault, and who's to say, why it's happening. But I know there's a gift in it, and sometimes it's hard to see. But in difficult times is when sometimes we do the most learning, because it's in successful times that we don't grow very often. We get complacent. And I feel like in difficult times, we grow the most. So I do believe in difficult times, they could define us, they could diminish us, or they could develop us. But either way, we decide. And so I would say to you in departing words, the super brains are really, really modern day superheroes from you. You are developing yourself. You have discovered and developed your superpowers, and you're on the path like all of us. And we're never gonna get it perfect. The goal is not to practice to be perfect, but it's to practice to make progress. And I think that's the goal here, that you learn so you could earn, so you could return. You know what I mean? Meaning that you learn, everything that you're learning how to learn, which I think is the most important topic, but then from there you earn. And I don't just mean financial treasure. I mean all the treasures of your life. When you work and you do the deep work, you get to benefit. You get the return. You get to earn. And then from when you have, then you have more to share and give. That's what I mean about returning or giving back. And I really feel like the spirit of everyone that's watching this, reading your comments, engaging with you like this, coming to a lot of Mind Valley events, Mind Valley Reunion, where I met a number of you, A-Fest, some of you might even be here in this building right now, and Tallinn at Mind Valley University, that no matter where we are in our life, you're in the right place at the right time, because it brought us together right now. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. And I look forward to, I love all your posts when you post on social media. Always tag me in those. So my team and I can see it, ask questions there. I try to chime in when I can, so I appreciate connecting with you there, and enjoy the rest of Super Brain, because as I like saying this at the end, I really do believe your brain and your life is like an egg, that if, it's broken by an outside force, life ends. But if an egg is broken by an inside force, life begins. And all great things begin on the inside. And you have greatness inside of you. You have genius inside of you. And so I wish your days be full of lots of life and lots of love, lots of laughter, and always, always lots of learning. I can't wait to talk to you again. And thank you for showing up. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your encouraging words. It has been wonderful as always. That's all from me. And until I see you next time on some of our other courses, or maybe when we do a live call again for Superbrain, I wish you an extraordinary life filled with lots of laughter and lots of love. And of course, as Jim already mentioned, lots and lots of learning. Be extraordinary, my friends. Take care. Bye-bye.